Welcome back. Let's talk petrol subsidy now. After scheduling the removal of the subsidy for the second half of this year, the outgoing government in Nigeria has now beaten a retreat. It's decided to suspend the removal of the controversial subsidy and has instead pushed the responsibility to the incoming government. It's something we have seen in the past with previous governments. On Thursday, April 27th, the National Economic Council presided over by Vice President Yemi Osinbajo announced that the planned removal of petrol subsidy will be suspended temporarily. Now, here is how the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning explained the decision.
Is that it is not going to be removed now, which means it will not be removed before the transition is completed. That's what it means. But then we have two laws that have inadvertently made the provision that we should exit by June. So if the committee's work, which will include the representatives of the incoming administration, determine that the removal can be done by June, then the work plan will be designed to exit as of June. But if the determination is that the period needs to be extended, it will mean that we will have, as a country, will have to revisit the Appropriation Act, for example, because the 2023 budget only made provision up to June. So if we're extending beyond June, it means we have to revisit the Appropriation Act and do a supplementary or amend the bill and also the PIA. These are the reasons why we had to do this consultation with NEC to get inputs from the governors. They are going to provide to us their representatives to work together with us to have a defined process that will take us towards the removal. But one thing that is clear is everybody agreed that the subsidy should be removed very quickly because the cost is only not efficient, but it's also not sustainable. And that when the time comes for removal, the removal will be done once and for all.
Well, joining me to discuss this new but unsurprising development is Dr. Muda Yusuf, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise. Dr. Yusuf, thank you very much for joining us on the program. Isn't this a clear case of buck passing here?
Well, not exactly, but let me make one point. What the minister said does not amount to a suspension of the removal of the fuel subsidy proposal. Because what we had on ground before now was that the fuel subsidy will cease to exist by the end of June. Budgetary provision has been made for that. The PIA has been amended to that effect. So the responsibility of determining whether this will go by end of June or not is for the next administration to determine. This administration is ending its tenure by May 29. So I don't know why NEC will have to go into this conversation and begin to steer on an unnecessary controversy. You cannot decide for the next administration. The next administration will come up with its own strategy. If the next administration feels that the 30th June is not realistic, then you have to put something on the table and engage the stakeholders.
But then this administration too has, not quite long ago, received about $800 million from from the World Bank? Yes, from the World Bank as some kind of support now for the subsidy removal. So isn't that a clear indication that this administration was actually planning to remove the subsidy before it leaves office?
No. What is on the table as a policy matter and even as a legislative matter is that this subsidy will remain until end of June. So whatever has to do with this issue of this subsidy removal is the responsibility of the next administration. Even the so-called palliative, the so-called $800 million, this administration has no responsibility managing that kind of fund. All of these things have to be left for the next administration to handle. And I know that the incoming administration also know that one of the major policy challenges that it will have to face is this subsidy thing. So I expect them to come to the table or to come to the administration with a plan, with a strategy. I even expect that by now, some informal engagement should have started. Because it's one of the major issues that they will have to confront. It's one of the heavy liftings that have to be done in terms of policy. So even the 800 million, this administration has no right or has no responsibility to manage it. Because subsidy removal is going to effect from July. It's ending in June. By which time this administration and all the members of NEC will have left office. You can't determine what the next administration will do. You can't determine their own strategy. You can't think for them. So it's not right to say that it has been suspended. And from what the minister said, it doesn't amount to a suspension. What the minister said was that the subsidy removal cannot take place until after the transition. And that has been the position.
Yeah, but
so
then
nothing has changed. I don't know where all this is coming
from the position of the minister, I mean, you also get the impression that, look, this administration was planning to remove it, and so they decided that at the NEC meeting, that's one of the reasons why they even discussed it in the first place, because if it was not scheduled for removal before this administration leaves office, why would they be discussing it anyway?
You see, my view is that it was not necessary for this matter to be discussed in the first place. Because the program of removing the subsidy is going to be effective after this administration had left office. So whatever will happen to subsidy is the responsibility of the incoming administration. Where would they have to discuss it? Where would the minister didn't need to come and be making any announcement to that effect? Because the position is very clear. That the PIA has been amended, budgetary position has been made for subsidy to exist up until the end of June. I mean, their responsibility stops at that point. Whatever will happen after May 29, up till end of June, as to whether it will go, whether there will be a phase removal, whether it will be rescheduled, whether there will be engagement, is the responsibility of the incoming administration. So the NEC dabbling into this matter at this time, for me, is completely unnecessary.
But it must be very tough for the incoming administration to begin on this note. I'm just wondering, has it not been left with a fait accompli, if you like? I mean, considering the fact that the budget provision for subsidy ends in June. So if anything at all, it's either the incoming government says, okay, it's going to continue that way, and that if it decides to retain it, then we'll be looking at a supplementary budget, because it means there will have to be another budget now for subsidy for the remaining half of the year.
That is left for them to decide. That is the point I'm making. It is left for the incoming administration to decide. I agree with your point that it's not likely to be that easy. A new administration cannot come and immediately slam this removal of subsidy on the citizens. Politically, that may be very difficult, particularly given the context in which all this election had gone and all the issues that were raised around the election and issues of legitimacy and so many issues. So it may not be politically strategic to come and announce a complete removal of subsidy.
But it has never been politically strategic anyway. There was never a time it was politically strategic.
No. Yes, I know, but it is more so because of the prevailing circumstances. All the challenges around the elections and issues. You know what I mean?
Yes, yes.
We
Absolutely.
have multiple, the fragmentation in the political space and all of that. All of those things have contributed to issues of legitimacy. And for a new government to come, you don't want to create a situation where people who have issues with the administration or the new administration, we have an opportunity to begin to disrupt things. This is what I mean by, being strategic as to how to deal with this issue politically. But whatever it is, the strategy, the framework will have to be determined by the new administration. The National Economic Council cannot be thinking for the new administration because we already have a position in place. And the position is that this subsidy will end by end of June. So if the new administration comes and it feels that this is no longer feasible, then we have to put a new timetable on the table. and engage the stakeholders as appropriate.
Give me your own position on this issue of subsidy removal, especially for the next administration. When you look at the current budget for subsidy, as we speak, for the first half of the year, 3.36 trillion naira. that would, if the incoming government now decides to continue with it, so we're likely going to see a doubling of that. So we'll probably be looking at subsidy spending at the end of the year of somewhere close to 9 or possibly between 8 and 9 trillion. Who knows? It could even go beyond that, depending on what the price of oil is at the international market. I'm just wondering, if you were to advise the government, the incoming government now, how do you think it should approach this issue?
Well, it's a very difficult one, I must admit. But what I think should happen, a whole lot of issues should happen simultaneously. First, there should be a timetable or a work plan to do a phased removal of the subsidy. Secondly, there has to be a combination or a mix of policies, fiscal and monetary policy, to ensure that there is, a cushioning of the effect, of the subsidy removal. Third, there has to be a mix of policies to ensure a transition or to reduce the demand for PMS and reduce the demand for diesel. And this we can do by quickly accelerating a process of, encouraging the citizens to move from the use of PMS or diesel to the use of gas. Some vehicles are now converting to CNG. We have institutions now who are using, they no longer use a diesel generator. They are using CNG. We have a lot more gas in terms of reserve than even crude oil. So this is an opportunity to optimize the use of gas. So whatever policies we can put in place to ensure that there is this gradual shift from the use of PMS, diesel, to the use of gas through the CNG, that is also a possibility. Then we have to also accelerate whatever we can do to improve the power supply. Because the power supply improves, the need for this PMS and diesel, the demand for them will reduce. Thirdly, we need to expand the scope of supply. Currently, that should be, the quick wins. Right now, what we have is a monopoly situation where only NNPC is the one importing.
And maybe we need to get our refineries to work.
We should get more players, give them better access to foreign exchange, so that more players can be able to import the petroleum products and sell in the short run.
But for as long as we continue to import, do you think we can ever exit this subsidy?
No, you see, you need to liberalize the space before you can invite investors. We cannot rely on government-run refineries. It's not sustainable. So when we talk about subsidy removal, it's not just about encouraging importation. More importantly, it's about plugging the loopholes. It's about saving revenue. But more importantly, it's about opening up the space to unlock investment. Investment into refineries, investment in pipelines, investment in petrochemicals. There's a whole lot that can happen in the downstream. And that will, create the opportunity for more private investors, which can grow the refining capacity. We cannot continue to rely on government-run refineries. Do you know how much we have spent in the last 10 years maintaining these refineries? What have you got out of it? So when people say that unless the refineries work, there should be no deregulation, or the subsidy should not be removed. Refineries cannot work well that is managed by government. Current refineries are being managed by bureaucrats and politicians. That cannot lead us anywhere. So if we really wish this country well economically, we should find a way to push back the role of government in this downstream and create an environment for more private investors to be there. And not just private investors, in a competitive environment. Because if you have it and there's no competition, you'll be back to square one. That is what is happening to the issue of current prices with diesel, with aviation fuel, and to some extent with PMS. We have a monopoly situation. It's only NNPC that is important. And if you don't have competition, opportunities for exploitation will increase. So that is the challenge that we have to face.
It's a very tough one, no doubt, for the incoming government. We'll just wait and see how it handles it. But no doubt, it's not the best position to start out as a government. All the same, Dr. Muda Yusuf, Chief Executive Officer of the Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise, thank you very much for your time and thank you for coming on the show. All right, we'll take a short break now, but when we come back, just why did almost all the pollsters get it wrong in calling the right results now in the last presidential election? Stay with us, don't go away. That's what we'll be talking about next. Opinions are free, facts are sacred, but truth is universal. How, in practical terms, can we, for instance, de-escalate the tension?
President must see himself as the President of the Federal Republic.
We know where the enemy is. 3 places. The Lake Chad Basin, the border area between Nigeria and Cameroon, and then the Sambisa Forest.
On DEJI360, we give you a complete dose of everything. Opinion, facts, and undiluted truth.
I hardly believe what politicians say in this part of the world.
A new Nigeria is possible, a future is possible.
We delve into the issues, dissect it so that you can understand it, and use it to take action.
I don't think there's any need for any governor to look for grant for ranching.
DEJI360, dissecting the issues.